I'd like to tell you a story about what happened to my brother, Roger, 15 years ago. The story I'm about to tell you will also explain why I hate Halloween more than any other day of the year. It all started on Halloween night in 2001. Yep, good old 2001. The same year the Twin Towers were taken down on 9/11, and it just so happened to be the last year that there was an actual full moon on Halloween. I'm not really sure if the full moon is even relevant to this story, but maybe it was. Regardless, something terrible happened to my brother that night. You see, he wasn't like other people and really into the whole Halloween thing. Besides, it's not like he and his wife could have gone out to a costume party or a bar all dressed up. They had a 1-year-old to care for. And, try getting a babysitter on Halloween night. Yeah, fat chance of that. So Roger decided that he was going to go fishing that afternoon instead. After all, it was late in the year, and the season was just about wrapped up before it got too cold. My brother had a lightweight fiberglass rowboat that he could haul to the lake in the bed of his truck. It was small enough that he didn't even need a trailer. Roger loved that crummy little boat. I guess it kind of grew on him. Anyway, he arrived at the lake sometime around 3 o'clock p.m., which had him in the water and to his favorite spot near the lilies on the west side of the lake about 3:15. Now, according to what he had told me, the crappies were biting like mad that afternoon, which was extremely unusual for late October. Extremely unusual. He had caught half his limit just as the sun crested the tree line on the western edge of the lake, and it started to get dark. Luckily, Roger was an avid fisherman and was always prepared for just about any situation. He had a little battery-powered lantern and a flashlight in his waterproof handy bag. So he planned to stay on the water and do some night fishing until he had caught his full bag limit for the day. And I mean, I couldn't blame the guy. Crappies are really good eating, and for them to be biting like that late in the year, hell, I probably would have done the same darn thing. So, as the afternoon turned into night, Roger continued fishing. He fished and fished until there was only one crappie left to his limit. All fishermen know the one. That last elusive fish. My brother had noticed that by then most of the boats had already surrendered to the boat landing. The lake only had one public landing, which was completely surrounded by dense forest. A lonely dirt road of about a half-mile tied the landing to the main highway on the other side of the woods. On the water, a cloudless night sky provided Roger with a healthy amount of moonlight, enabling him to see most of the 120-acre lake. And you know what? It might have been all that moonlight that bestowed upon Roger that awesome luck with the crappies, too. Maybe. Anyway, it was after 9 o'clock p.m., and stubborn Roger was still chasing that last keeper. It was around that time that he had scanned the lake and realized that he was the last boat left on the water. Kind of a scary thought, isn't it? All alone out there on that dark, calm, glassy lake surface, all by yourself. Even while surrounded by the comforting glow of a lantern, the combination of nightfall and wilderness always has a tendency to mess with one's head, especially on All Hallows Eve. So Roger decided to haul up his anchor and call it quits. Besides, cell phones were still just a luxury item for many folks back then. My brother didn't own one. He'd need to get home soon before his wife started freaking out. Roger hastily removed his wooden oars from their cradles and began rowing back to the boat landing. He sat with his back to the bow at first, because it's way easier and faster to row that way. Once he was closer to the gravelly beach of the landing, he'd spin around on his bench and row facing forward, so he could see where he was going. As his arms worked the oars, Roger watched as the moonlight glistened off the ripples of his wake. The steel stringer of 9 fish trailed behind the little boat as my brother picked up speed. Occasionally, one of the fish would thrash about and attempt to free itself from its inevitably doomed fate. Even though my brother had heard the splashing and clinking of that stringer's metal links 100 times before, he said that on that particular evening it disturbed the bejesus out of him. Once Roger was approximately 30 yards from the gravel landing, he cradled the oars and turned around on his seat. It was at that moment he saw something move along the gravelly beach near the tree line. It was a dark, shadowy figure. The thing stood upright like a man would, but it was hunched over, almost as if it were looking for something on the ground along the water's edge. Or it might have been in pain. He wasn't exactly sure. As Roger's boat slowly glided closer to the landing, he noticed that whatever was on the beach was watching him, waiting for him. And whatever it was, it didn't look human. The dark figure wasn't wearing any clothes. The skin that covered its body was black and shining, like oil. The thing didn't have any hair whatsoever, and moonlight glistened off its head, neck, and shoulders, almost as if the flesh was wet somehow. At first, Roger assumed it was just some joker in a rubber costume messing with him. After all, it was Halloween. People have been known to do dumb stuff like that. You know, hoaxes and whatnot. But, besides for my brother's truck parked in the corner, the boat landing small parking lot was completely empty, which meant somebody was really going out of their way to scare the crap out of the poor guy. Roger said that he had felt exposed with the lantern giving off light in the boat, so he clicked it off and picked up his flashlight instead. He thought that maybe a quick shine of bright light would expose the turd on the beach for what he really was, just a prankster on Halloween with nothing better to do than mess with the solitary fisherman on the lake. When Roger shined his light on the jokester, the man immediately put his costumed hands up to his face to block the light. My brother said that the thing had some kind of webbing in between its shiny black fingers. The costume was very elaborate, maybe even Hollywood grade. So Roger laughed at the guy covering his eyes and hollered, "Hey, that's a first-class outfit you got on there. You must have spent a pretty penny on that. I hope it was worth it." But the man on the beach didn't respond. In fact, what he did next was very disturbing. This is where the story gets really bizarre. Get this, the guy started walking out towards my brother. Yup, in the cold, late October water. Roger was stunned. There's a pretty steep drop-off not far from the gravelly beach, and within a few steps the prankster was completely submerged. Roger's heartbeat quickened. What the heck was going on? He decided to set down his flashlight and row a few strokes further away from the boat landing, just in case the idiot in the water was a really good swimmer. 30 yards and a minute later, the costumed swimmer still hadn't surfaced. Then another minute passed. Roger cradled his oars and frantically shined his flashlight around the boat. He was getting very worried. What in the hell was that thing? He thought, as he scanned the water for any signs of the submerged invader. It couldn't possibly be human. It's been underwater too long. A human would need air by now, he said to himself. And Roger was correct. Because just then, he felt his boat begin to move. A calm, breezeless night meant that it wasn't the wind messing with his boat either. It had to be something else. My brother's heart was pounding now. Behind him, he heard the raspy sound of metal ink scratching against the fiberglass hull of his boat. The situation was clear. Something was pulling on the stringer of 9 fish. Before Roger could react, the bolt suddenly jolted violently, almost knocking Roger off his bench. Then, the boat picked up speed. Whatever was dragging him away from the boat landing was very strong. He had to get that stringer unhooked before he was hauled out to the cold, deep water of the middle of the lake. So, once again, Roger carefully spun around on his bench. Trying to keep his balance without capsizing, he leaned forward and reached for the clip that attached the stringer to the hull. He really didn't want to lose those fish, but it was his only option at that point. Remarkably, my brother was able to unhitch that metal clip without a problem, and the stringer of fish plunged into the dark abyss, gone forever. Afterwards, Roger felt the boat ease down to a slow glide. He figured he was at least 60 or 70 yards from the gravelly beach of the landing. Now what? He had to make a decision. Either A, row as fast as he could back to the boat landing, or B, fight it out with whatever had taken him for the ride. He was pretty sure that the creature was humanoid, but what in the hell was that thing? Roger decided that if it, whatever it was shaped like a man, it could be fought like a man. The next decision was whether to defend himself with a pocket knife or with one of the short wooden oars. Personally, I would have chosen the knife, but I wasn't in the boat at the time. It was my brother, and he had decided to go with the oar. So Roger put the flashlight in his mouth and held the bludgeon on his shoulder as if it were a baseball bat, and waited for the creature to surface. Seconds passed, then a minute, maybe even 2 minutes. He wasn't sure. All the adrenaline coursing through his body had slowed down time for him. Roger's jaw began to tire from gripping the flashlight, and he realized he was drooling all over his jacket. There was still no sign of the creature. He had almost decided to give up and begin rowing back to the boat landing when he heard a splash to his right. A shiny black hand suddenly emerged from the dark water and grasped the rim of the boat. "Oh, hell no," Roger shouted, and blasted the hand with the oar. From what my brother had told me, it was a direct hit. An eerie, high-pitched, watery, bubbly-sounding wail indicated that he had definitely heard the creature, whatever it was. The hand then disappeared into the water. Roger quickly popped his oar into place and rowed toward the beach like he had never rowed before. And guess what? He made it. The sound of the boat's hull scratching against the gravelly beach was the sweetest sound he had ever heard. Roger snatched up his handy bag and leapt out of the boat, leaving his fishing pole and everything else behind. He ran to his truck, frantic to get out of there before the creature left the water for a ground pursuit. Keeping an eye over his shoulder, Roger ran as fast as he could, digging his keys out of his pocket along the way. But just before he got to his truck, 2 more creatures, both of them shiny, black, and hunched over almost exactly like the first one, suddenly hobbled from the front of the truck and moved toward the driver's side door. They were blocking it. "Oh, you want to play rough now? Is that it?" Roger shouted at the oily-looking humanoids. Anger had replaced fear, and it now dominated my brother's emotions. The beast just stood there, waiting, staring at him with slanted, sinister-looking black and red eyes. It almost seemed as if they were grinning or something. But Roger was no longer afraid. He grinned right back at the bizarre things as he dug out the craftsman pocket knife out of his handy bag. "I got a little something here for the 2 of you." He smiled and took a step towards them. Well, the creatures were human enough to know what a pocket knife was, because the strange grinning on their black lips stopped. Both of the oily-looking bastards sidestepped away from the driver's side door. "That's right, keep walking, fellas," Roger said, holding a knife out in front of them. The creatures reluctantly obeyed and slinked away around the front of the truck. Satisfied that he was now out of immediate danger, Roger laughed and unlocked the door. Getting inside, he suddenly realized that he had forgotten about the first creature that had attacked his boat. Oops. Just as my brother tried to close the truck's door, a battered, shiny black hand came out of nowhere and prevented the door from closing. Roger's first reaction was to pull harder, but the wiry-looking creature was way too strong. They struggled against each other for a second, but then, before Roger could react, the creature lunged forward and bit my brother in the left forearm. He said the thing's teeth weren't very long, but they were sharp as needles and it hurt like a son of a bitch. Roger still had the knife in his right hand, so he went for the creature's head. The oily-looking monster saw it coming, though, and ducked away, which provided my brother with an opportunity to get the door closed and locked. He told me that when he started up his truck, all three of the strange beings hauled ass back to the gravelly beach and disappeared into the water. He was able to drive away without further incident. The next morning, Roger went back to the boat landing to pick up his boat and the gear that he had left behind. Thankfully, everything was still there. This time, he was packing a 9mm semi-automatic pistol, but he didn't need it. There was no sign of the creatures that had attacked him. I asked Roger why he didn't call the police, and his response was, "What am I supposed to tell them? That I got attacked by some strange-looking fish people?" I had nothing to say to that. He was probably right. Nobody would have believed him. Roger did swear to me that he would never fish at that lake ever again, even though it was one of his favorites. Now, I'd like to tell you that this is the end of the story, but unfortunately, it's not. The days that followed his fishing trip weren't very good ones. My brother became unusually irritable and angry. My wife even said that Roger's wife had told her that she feared for her own safety. Every time I tried to speak with my brother about it, he just blew me off and changed the subject. He refused to talk about the incident at the lake anymore, too, which was odd, because I think that the attack was the issue that was bothering him. So, as the weeks passed, Roger became more and more recluse. He quit his job and spent all of his time in his basement. He even slept down there. His wife never harassed him about it, since she was too afraid of him becoming violent with her. So everyone just left him alone and hoped that he'd snap out of his funk eventually. But he never did. Then, out of the blue, Roger's wife called me one morning and said that my brother had been missing for 2 days, and he had taken his truck. Roger had never done anything like that before. It was out of character for him. I told her to go ahead and notify the police, and then I'd help out by driving around to see if I could spot the truck anywhere. Now, for some strange reason, I felt as though I needed to check the lake where Roger was attacked. I don't know why I thought that way. It was like a sixth sense was telling me that he'd be there. Maybe he had decided to confront his demons head on. I was actually rather optimistic about it. So I drove to the lake, and sure enough, there was Roger's truck in the parking lot. "Ha! I knew it," I said happily to myself as I pulled in. But my optimism was short-lived. Roger was nowhere to be seen. His truck doors weren't even locked. I searched everywhere for clues, but found nothing. My brother had vanished without a trace. The police never found him, even though they dragged the lake and sent a search party through the forest. And like I said earlier, this was 15 years ago, and Roger is still missing to this day. The only thing I can do now is wait for the next full moon on Halloween. Then I'm going to go back to that wretched lake with extreme prejudice. And you better believe that I'll be armed too. But I won't get that opportunity until the year 2020. Until then, I'll be waiting.